Today we will discuss, rather try to know, why intellectuals historically remain blind to life. They remain unhappy, depressed. Many committed suicide in their life. Why? Basically, intellectual activities is about a search of truth, search of life, search of reality. But historically, this search of the truth has been a mind game, a mind activity which comes from the memories given in the past. And from these memories, scientists make assumptions about truth. And these assumptions are or have been historically for political consumption. Because the assumption is coming from memory, which is created by socialization. The very moment individual goes in search of truth through mind, the very moment he gets disconnected from the life. Look at the assumptions of intellectuals. Intellectual here, I include all philosophers and scientists. Those who use mind for understanding reality. Look at the assumptions of Aristotle, father of science. His truth is through assumptions, syllogism. He tried to understand truth through given assumptions. And his assumptions are taken by Newton. The Newton's assumptions about nature is, he thinks nature is a machine which functions on fixed principles. Nature is like a machine which functions on fixed logics. And God created the world through logic, based on laws. And we can understand this, or we can know the God through reason, he says. He was a believer in God. The father of modern philosophy, Descartes, also says we can know the God through mathematics. They were all in search of God who created the world. Now comes godless people, scientists like Darwin. He says there is no God. Life has evolved and species are inferior and superior by birth itself. Look at the assumption. And this assumption about life, about nature, gave birth to new science, that is eugenics. And because of this new science, eugenics, human beings were killed, butchered in the name of science. The whole search was truth, for truth, objective truth. Whole search was to remove the mind from the truth, to remove the belief, assumptions from the truth. Descartes has tried to do it. Descartes says we need to remove assumptions from the fact. Descartes' doubt, we call it. Further, there was a philosopher, his name was Edmund Husserl. He talks about bracketing. He talks about suspending the assumptions about objective world. In his book, Crisis in European Sciences, a phenomenological understanding of life. He says we need to understand the objective world as it is without making an assumption about it. He says this is because this is the subject which decides the object. It is a subjective world which decides the objective world. Hence, we need to disconnect or separate this subjective world if you want to really know the objective world. But he couldn't do it. Later, Martin Heidegger wrote a book, Being and Time. In this, he says it is not only the subjective world which decides the objective world. Even the objective world decides the subjective world. He explains this with a beautiful argument, that is hammering, carpenter hammering. And he says we are thrown in, Dasein is thrown in this world. He has to live under the pressures of society. Hence he doesn't know how to live in this world. He's tense, depressed, and that is the reason he feels meaninglessness in this life. The important point he says is, it is the objective world which decides the subjective world. Here he says, it is the language of society. It creates the mind of the people. It creates the subjectivity of the people. Hence, we need to remove the historicity from the language, because he thinks language is history, language is historical. If you remove historicity from the language, you can understand the objective world. Called destruction, a German word. Later, the Heideggerian influence become very important. There was one more scholar. His structure is Saussure. He says, objective world the language do not decide or do not reflect the objective world. There is no inherent relation between signifier and signified. He is saying language is arbitrary construction. It doesn't reflect the objective world at all. Derrida, further, he says language creates only differences. Forget about truth and objective world. It creates only differences in society. It creates hate in the name of truth. Hence, He talks about deconstruction of the whole logocentrism of the West. Now comes existentialism. Existentialism. Many philosophers in it. They say there is no objective reality at all. All objective reality is a construction of vested interest. Hence, there is no truth. Life is meaningless. Life is nausea. Hence, we need to commit suicide. This is the story of mind. It had to happen because mind has a limitation. That is the reason intellectual world is all confused. They have no glimpses of reality at all. They lost life in language, just in some language. Empiricism, rationalism, induction, deduction. Separated mind from the body. In all these language games, they missed the life. They couldn't find, they couldn't feel it.